What did you just do? So like the difference between ostensibly like a snake skull and then your skull is that the interior of such has the dynamics when it's split and looked at from under to on top. Is that of which is like a dragon. I don't know if you've ever seen a flower called like, it's not baby's breath, but it's like a dragon's head. It's got that serpent shape. And then, so the massive like pressure systems between each of those are like valves. And I was trying to think, the life force between like the feet and the head is the fluid dynamics of the electrochemical that would be ranging almost like an entire, is the fluid dynamics of the electrochemical that would be ranging almost like an entire sea of different waves, and that would constitute for the interior about a spine encumbering the skeletal structure of the most fantastic beast, if you're speaking about Harry Potter's gargoyles. But in turn, when it comes to something as though an animality of whatever would be a hazard, so you have to categorize all the different hazards of fantastic beasts. If you were to strip everything from your body, what would make the constitute of it being real? I'd argue the brain and your genes. What's the difference between a snake and you? Well, in the animal kingdom, there's always a spine or a vertebrae. And if you have a cranium, that's something as though in Mortal Kombat, if you detach your person from hitting them up like a Rock'em Sock'em robot, the spine and the skull look as though it's just a snake's entire skeleton structure. When it comes to projections of you being any animal, it would encumber a snake and then the build-up about it. That buildup about it can be representing as a silver lining, where the atoms that make up your DNA, they have potentials with all the electrons about them to emulate a holographic projection of any animal. Now, in holographic principles, its utilization is from just light and projecting. If it was a material, it'd be something close to a transformer, how they're all rendered off polygon shapes of what's a projection versus the projectile. A dragon, though it's not real, is known as a powerful figure. So combating a goose with a dragon, the division of church and state is something that's fundamental, and the difference between fundamental and rudimentary are confused between like artificial and synthetic, polarizing. The prime numbers are infinite, but then there's definite amounts in between the prime numbers, and this is a problem in mathematics that people have tried to handle as the two infinities persist, but then they contradict each other. I saw a young dolphin music videos. He mentioned the Wisconsin dells having a lot of water. And then he also mentioned putting his faith into a vacuum seal. This is in connoisseurship where he's making the goods be as fresh as possible. And when you're doing this inside of a garden, the garden has these resemblance of not something that's synthetically grown. So the enrichment of that is something where it's characterized as natural. And that can't be mistaken for a computer process. It's kind of like pre-programming how a QR code works, is that it's pre-programmed to register. And in a blink of an eye is something that is the difference between sound and light, because they're both infinities, but when they're added together, it can constitute, for a ball being inside of a cube and looking out from that is a projection. Something as though is like a projection. Is something as though projection when it has just a difference of quality of small and large, that can constitute for a spiral when you keep adding onto it, the Fibonacci sequence. And not to be too airy in having things look out of sorts and too abstract, but it's with the setting of a backdrop that can constitute the feng shui of nature, and that would be resonating inside of a soul as truth, versus something that you know is faking the funk at face value. That slight deviation of value being bigger to small can resonate with some people when it comes down to race, the battle of racism, and they would do drastic circumstances. This is how an opposite is viewed as a value. That's a defining characteristic of them, is to not have oppression of the opposite. Opposite is different than an empty space because they can't be confused as the same, or else you would be fighting for no purpose. And so when everyone's saying, I'm Spartacus, and some of the best stories are the things that shouldn't happen, but then they do. The widest prize you can think of is not having a ball and chain. And so in Aladdin, the genie is confined to the lamp, and then that's like the ball and chain, and his soul is just this gas. I'd like to couple that with how when you die, they try and bring you back by shocking you. Getting shocked by those two metal plates is something as like a jump start to a heart, the electricity within it. And in the Nutcracker, Uncle Drosselmeyer makes a wooden figurine come to life. And in Pinocchio, Geppetto, he makes a wooden figurine come to life too. So the most inanimate objects would be wood being electrified. Well, they both put life into it.